Welcome to completing the square. Perhaps you've had some trouble completing the square. It can be a little bit tricky before you learn how to do it. You need to learn how to do it, practice until it becomes easy to do, and you've got the steps down. So let's get going, and we'll go through a few examples and give you an idea of how you can be an expert. So here's a slide that just particularly shows one example, and sometimes you can follow just a simple example like this. It gives you the steps, and once you get used to it, this will become automatic. All right, let's start with number 1. We've got 14 questions here we're going to try to go through, and the first one is relatively easy actually. It says only one of the following equations does not, and here we go, does not, remember it's not, require step 1 of the method for completing the square. Well, step 1 is you have to make sure that your equation starts with 1x squared. Keeping that in mind, which one of these is it? Well, when you expand this, it's not a 1x squared. You can tell that immediately, I hope. When you expand this, it's not a 1x squared. And looking down here, obviously, there's not a 1x squared there either. This is the 1. Starts out with 1x squared, so that's your guy. Next, let's do the same thing. See if you can do it. Hit pause, go through those, pick the one you think is right. Okay, got one? Here we go. Let's go 1x squared right there. Now let's really get into it and go through some nice examples to give you an idea of how to work these in case you've been having difficulty. Let's start with this one. First of all, notice there's a 1x squared, so step 1 is gone. You don't have to divide by something that's a coefficient of the x squared. If it were 4x squared instead, you'd have to divide that by 4 to end up with x squared by itself. And of course, you divide that 4 into all the terms, but we're past that. We've got 1x squared. Second, do you have a 0? Does it equal to 0? Yes. So we're past step 2. Next step. Next step is you're going to be completing the square, so you need some room to complete the square. So we're going to add 9 to both sides, which will give us x squared plus 8x. We're going to leave it blank because we're going to add something to that. And to get rid of the minus 9, we'll add 9 to both sides, and there we are. Now this is what you're going to do next. This might not be what you show on your paper when you get accustomed to this, but this is the next step. Leave some space so that you have an x squared term, an x term, a blank, and then whatever you need to have over on the other side. Next, look at the coefficient of x. Well, that's an 8. You're going to do two things. You're going to take that 8 and divide it by 2. The next step is you're going to take that 8 over 2 and you're going to square it. So what's 8 over 2? What's a 4? What's 4 squared? It's a 16. That's the number we need to complete the square. So it's going to go in right there. So our next step, write down what we've already got. We're going to add a 16. Now if we add it to the left side, we must add it to the right side, right? Next, we just completed the square. So we're going to have a quantity like this squared. It's going to be a binomial. Well, x squared comes from x, of course. The 16 we squared from the 4, so the 4, and this operation right here between the x squared and the 8x, that tells us what goes in the middle. So you have quantity x plus 4 quantity squared equals, now on the other side, just add those two together, you've got 25. Following that, we use the square root property and take the square root of both sides. Now, here's a tip for you. This probably obvious is x plus 4. The square root of a square is the number itself. And the square root of 25 is 5. But don't stop there. As soon as you write down the x plus 4, you might want to remind yourself by writing it twice. That way, when you write the 5 and you have this blank over here, you're reminded that 5 and negative 5 squared to give you 25. Once you've got these two equations written down, solve them independently. In the first one, we'll subtract 4, and that'll give us x equals 1. There's one solution. On the second one, subtract 4, same thing we did in the other one, except this time we get a negative 9. And there are our two answers. Now, if the question said find the solution set, which it doesn't here, but if it did, then your answer should be in set notation, 1 and 9 inside braces to indicate it's a set. Okay, that's number 3. We'll go on and do another. All right, step 1, good shape. We've got the 1x squared, but we need to leave some room to complete the square. So leave the x squared plus 4x there. We've got to get rid of the 68, so it becomes a negative 68. Now what's next? We've got x squared plus, okay, it's this coefficient right here is the one that we're going to work with. So first, divide it by 2, and then square the answer. So we'll be squaring 2, which means 4 is the number we're going to add over here. So we've already got the x squared plus 4x, and the number we're going to add is this number over here of 4. On the right side, we've already got a negative 68, and we'll add a 4 to that. Okay, what do we have? Well, we completed the square. What square? Well, we completed the square that we get from x plus 2. Where do we get the 2? Well, it's this number that we squared over here. The number you get when you divide by 2. Now, that's the entire left side because it's a square. On the right side, a negative 64 is what we've got. Following that, we take the square root of both sides. Now what I'm going to do is what I told you the last time. I'm going to write that x plus 2 twice. That way I don't forget. Over here, x plus 2 equals, and I need to take the square root of negative 64. But remember, the first thing you do is split out the negative 1 and the 64. So that's 8i, or 8i like that. So the square root of negative 64 is 8i. And as soon as we write that down, we can write its opposite over here. And then just solve a simple equation. Subtract 2 from both sides. There's a negative 2 plus 8i is one solution. And the second solution is negative 2 minus 8i. Similar, but different. All right. Let's move along to number 5 then. How does this go? Well, we've got the 1x squared, so we're good there. We don't have space to add the completion, so first x squared minus 14x, negative 13. Next, we'll take that 14 divided by 2, that gives us 7, and we're going to square the answer. That gives me 49. That's the number we're going to add to both sides, because that will complete this square. Remember, you add it to both sides. Now on the left side, what square have we completed? We've completed x minus 7 quantity squared. Remember, the 7 comes from this number inside, the number that you got when you divided by 2. On the other side, we'll combine those two, and that gives us a nice 36. We won't have to work with i's this time, will we? Take the square root of both sides of just x minus 7, and to make sure we don't forget, we'll write it twice because this is a quadratic. It'll have 2 solutions. And the square root of 36 is 6. And we've got a blank over here. That's going to be the opposite of that 6. There we go. Solve those simple equations. Add 7. This gives us x equals 13. And this gives us x equals 1. There are 2 solutions for number 5. Moving along to number 6. Aha! Here's one that step 1 is not finished. Notice that we've got 2x squared. You don't want to work with that. So the first thing we need to do is divide things by 2, but let's get this 3 out of the way first. So 2x squared plus 7x equals negative 3. Now we'll divide by the 2. 2 into the first one, it will be x squared. 2 into the next one, or multiplying by 1/2, will give you 7/2 x. Leave the blank. Over here, divide that by 2, we'll have negative 3 over 2. Moving along. Okay, what do we have to complete the square? We've got to put something in here that will complete the square. Well, let's take that 7/2, that is the coefficient of x. What are we going to do? We're going to take half of that. Well, the easy way to do that is multiply it by 1/2. We're going to take half of that, and we're going to square the answer. Well, inside, we get 7/4. We're going to square that. Don't forget, we're not finished. Square that of 49/16. So that's what we're going to add to both sides. So down here, we'll have x squared plus 7/2 x plus the number we just found, 49/16 equals. And I'm going to add 49/16 over here. Now, why did I skip this temporarily? Because I need to write negative 3 over 2 in 16ths so I can add them together. Well, how can I get 16? Well, if I multiply the bottom by 8, that would give me the 16 in the bottom. If I do that, though, I'll have to multiply the top by 8 as well. So I've got negative 24/16. That's the same thing as negative 3 over 2. So we'll put that over here. Negative 24/16 is our old negative 3 over 2. Next, we'll factor this, x, and this right here, the coefficient of x will tell us what sign to put here. Since this is a plus 7/2, we'll put a plus there. What do we put next? We'll look back over here. When we took a half of 7/2, we got 7/4. That's the number that goes in here. 7/4. That's the square that we were looking for. Remember that x plus 7/4 quantity squared is the same thing as this, but factored out. Now, what does that give me? On the other side, I've already set it up so I can add those two fractions pretty easily. And I end up with 25/16. And I'm ready to go. Next, square root of the left-hand side is x plus 7/4 equals square root of the right side is 5/4. Now, before I can forget it, I also have to say x plus 7/4 could be a negative 5/4. And finally, solve those. I'm going to sneak up here for the next line. X plus 7/4, I have to subtract 7/4 from both sides, which will give me x equals negative 2/4. Better yet, x equals negative 1/2 is one of my solutions. On the second one, do the same thing, subtract 7/4. This time we get x equals negative 12/4, also known as x equals negative 3. We've got our two solutions. Remember, your best bet is to take those two solutions and check them in here. Make sure they work. And it's real easy. Just take the negative 3, for example, put it in for the x's, and see if you end up with 0. And remember, shortcut, you can take that negative 3, store it in x, type this in your calculator, see if you end up with 0. If you do, then the negative 3 is good. And you could do the same thing with negative 1/2. Take that negative 1/2 and store it in x, type in the equation, see if you get 0. Next, we'll look at number 7. Looks as though we've got another challenge on our hands. So, first thing we'll do is we're going to leave room for completing the square. So, 5x squared plus 2x, and we'll move the 3 over here. Now I need the 1x squared, so I'm going to divide everything by 2, or divide everything by 5, excuse me. We want 1x squared. Now a better idea, instead of thinking dividing by 5, you might want to consider thinking multiply by 1/5. So this 5x squared becomes x squared. That looks good. 1/5 times 2, just in case you need this as a reminder, that gives me 2/5 plus 2/5 x. Remember, this equation is going to be the same as the one above, except everything divided by 5. And on the right side, divide that by 5 or multiply it by 1/5, and that's what we've got so far. Next, we need to complete that square. So, I'm going to take that 2/5, that's the coefficient of x. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to multiply it by 1/2. When I'm finished with that, I'm going to square it. Remember, multiply by 1/2 and square it. So inside, what have I got? Well, the 2's cancel, so I have 1/5, and I haven't squared it yet. It'll be 1/25. That's what I need to add to both sides. So, moving back over here, x squared plus 2/5 x plus the number I just found, 1/25 equals. Now over here, I know I need 25 as a denominator. So here's the number I'm going to add to it. I need the 3/5 to be 25. So I'll multiply by 5 to get the denominator right. 5 times the numerator, keep the value, and 15/25 is what I need here. 15/25 is another way of writing 3/5. All right, we're getting close. So what do we have? X, of course. This sign right here, or operation, tells me put a plus there. What do I have that gives me 1/25? It's 1/5. That's the number that you squared over here, right there. That's quantity squared equals. And over here, we'll add those two together. We get 16/25. Now it's time to use the square root property. X plus 1/5 equals square root of the right side, 4/5. And remember, we get two answers. X plus 1/5 equals -4/5. And we're almost there. On the left-hand equation, we'll subtract 1/5 from both sides, and we get 3/5 as one of our solutions. On the right-hand side, we'll subtract 1/5 again, and we'll have -5/5, or -1. If we were asked for a solution set, we put 3/5, -1, and would have a correct. All right, you ready to move on? I hope so. Well, how about that? We've got 1x squared. That's going to make it simple, won't it? So the first thing I need to do is make some space. We've almost got the space we need to move this out. So we'll make that x squared plus 10x. Leave a space. -24 is on the other side already. Now what do I do next? I take the 10, which is the coefficient of x. I'm going to divide by 2. That gives me 5. And before I stop, I'm going to square that. It gives me 25. So 25 is what I'm going to need to complete that square. X squared plus 10x plus the 25 I just found equals -24 plus 25. Fortunately, in this one, I don't have fractions, so I don't have to prepare the -24. All right, what does that give us? Well, it gives us x plus, remember before I squared, I had a 5. And the plus comes from here. So x plus 5 quantity squared equals, just add those two together on the right-hand side, I've got a 1. That's going to be easy, won't it? So take the square root of both sides. Now here's a tip. I didn't do it in the previous ones, but this is an extra one to remind you. Write that x plus 5 down twice, because remember, you're going to get two answers since it's a quadratic. Well, what do you put down? Well, in the first one, the square root of 1 is 1. And now I know I've got to go over here because I've got a blank. What is it? It's the opposite of what I just wrote. So it's -1. Now, solve those. Get a -4 for one solution. And we get a -6 for the other solution. There are two answers. Remember, you should go up here, check out the -4, make sure it works, make sure it gives us -24. Check out the -6, make sure that gives us a -24 as well. Moving along to number 9. Okay, we've got a 1x squared, that's good. I'm going to leave it blank here, and we're ready to go. Now we'll take that 8, which is the coefficient of x, 8/2, and then square it. So we have 4 squared, 16 is our number. So we'll have x squared plus 8x plus the 16 equals 7, and add the 16 to the other side as well. Now on the left side, we factor that. X plus What did I have before I squared it? I had a 4. So the 4 goes in here. The plus 8x means plus goes there. Quantity squared. What do I have on the right side? Well, I had the 7 and 16. We've got a 23. Now it's time to take the square root of x plus 4. Remember, you got 2 answers for the x plus 4. We'll take the square root of the other side. Well, this one doesn't work out quite as nicely, but we're going to keep the exact value. No jumping to your calculator and writing 4 point something, because we don't care. We want the exact answer. Now, as soon as I write that down, remember there's going to be a second one over here. It's just the opposite of what we just wrote down. Now, solve those. Subtract 4 from both sides. Remember, you can't add the 4 to the square root of 23. Of negative 4 plus the square root of 23. You can reverse those if you like. You might like to do it this way though. And on the other one, you'll subtract 4 again. This time you'll have negative 4 minus the square root of 23. 2 answers for a quadratic equation. That's number 9. Let's move on to 10. Next. All right, we've got to make some rearrangements. We do have 1x squared, so that's good. But we need the x term over on that side. So x squared plus 4x. I'll leave it blank, and we've got 9 on the right side. Now we've got to figure out what completes that square. So we'll take that 4, it's the coefficient of x, divide it by 2, and square the answer. Divide by 2, square. So we get 2 from the 4 over 2. We're going to square it. So 4 is going to complete our square. So that gives us x squared plus 4x plus 4 completes the square. Since I added 4 to the left, I add 4 to the right as well. Now, time to factor. X plus what? Well, the number before I squared it over here was a 2. So it'll be x plus 2, quantity squared. That's the same thing as this up here, equals. And it's equal to 13. I'm sorry, that's not a perfect square. We'll just have to deal with it, right? Now we'll take the square root using the square root property, x plus 2, and we'll write it twice so we don't forget. So that's the square root of the left, square root of the right. Well, we're stuck with a radical. Too bad. And we write down the positive answer, and we'll write the negative answer as well. Subtracting 2 from both sides, we have x equals negative 2 plus the square root of 13. And after you've solved a few of these, you notice I can almost guess what the other side is. Negative 2 minus the square root of 13. Here's where the calculator comes really handy. If we look at this answer, for example, the negative 2 minus the square root of 13, we can easily put that in the calculator. We don't care what the actual number is, right now anyway. Store that in x, and type in x squared, see what you get. Then type in 9 minus 4x. See if those two answers agree. If they agree, then that is a solution. Then you check the other one very similarly. Number 11. Oh, here we go again, right? 3x squared. So I guess you're saying someone doesn't like me. Well, we don't care about that for right now. I like you. 3x squared minus 5x, and we're going to move the 8 over there. Then we'll divide by 3 or multiply by 1/3 if you like. That'll give us the 1x squared that we need. 1/3 times the next one, we'll have 5/3 x. Leave it blank. And don't forget to do the same to the right side. You've got 8/3. Next, we need to find out what completes the square. So we'll take that 5/3. Remember, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to multiply it by 1/2, and we'll square the answer. On the inside, we'll have 5/6, and we're going to square it to get what we need to complete the square, which will be 25/36. So let's take that 25/36 and put it in the blank here. So we'll have x squared minus 5/3 x. And there's the magic bullet for us, 25/36. On the other side, we're going to add 25/36. Now the 8/3 is not in 36. How do we make it into 36? Well, we're going to have to multiply the denominator by 12 to get that 36. So 12 also goes up there. So 3 times 12 is 36. 8 times 12 is 96. And there's the missing number. So the 8/3 can be written as 96/36. We're a little bit closer now. All right, time to factor. X minus, what was it before we squared it? It was 5/6. So x minus 5/6, quantity squared, gives us this left-hand side. On the right-hand side, what do we have? Well, we're going to be adding these two. Fortunately, they now have 36 as a common denominator. So all we need to do is add the numerators. And we get 121. If you don't recognize that, I'll give you a hint. It's 11 squared on the top. Ah, good, huh? So we're going to take the square root of the left side, x minus 5/6. And I'm going to write x minus 5/6 over here too, just as a reminder. Now I took the square root of the left side, square root of the right side. I gave you a hint. It's 11/6. And I'll write negative 11/6 here since it's so easy to do. On the left side, we'll add 5/6 to both sides, and we'll get 16, equals 16/6. Yep, or 8/3. Over here, we'll add 5/6 to both sides, and we'll get minus 6/6, which is -1. So if we wanted a solution set, our solution set would be 8/3 and -1. Or maybe we'd rather write it as 2 2/3, -1, dividing that by that 3. Got it? Well, we've got 3 more to go. Let's go ahead and finish this up. Number 12. Oh, that looks pretty good. You've got a 1x squared. You're ready to go. X squared, 8x, leave it blank. -12 is already on the other side. What do we need to complete the square? Take that 8, divided by 2, square the answer. What do we get? 4 squared, 16 is the magic number. So back over here, x squared plus 8x plus 16 completes that square. On the right side, we'll have -12 plus the 16 again. On the left side, we'll factor x plus 4, because 4 is the number before the square. 4, quantity squared, because we completed the perfect square. On the right side, we'll add those together, and we get a -4. If you're keeping up with everything, the -4 should ring a bell with you. We're not going to get a real answer. We'll get an answer, but not a real number. Next, square root of both sides. We'll have x plus 4, and we'll write it down twice so we don't forget. Now, what's the square root of -4? If you can't do it in your head, remember, factor out the square root of -1. And this is a 2. This is represented by I, so it's 2i. So over here, we've got x plus 4 equals 2i. And immediately we can write minus 2i for the other one. Finishing up, we have x equals -4 plus 2i. And no big surprise, we'll get -4 minus 2i, and we've got our two solutions. This is another case where it's nice using our calculator. Take that -4 plus 2i, store it in x, type in x squared plus 8x, and do you get a -12 on both of those solutions? If you do, then check and check. Number 13, next to last, we're getting there. 1x squared, hey, great. We'll just leave it blank. 3 is already on the right side. We can go at this. So what do we add to complete the square? We'll take that 4, multiply it by a half, square your answer. So we've got 2 squared is the number we're going to need. So we'll write down x squared plus 4x plus that 4 that we just found. Sorry. And on the other side, don't forget to add it to both sides. 3 looks nice, but it's not 3 anymore. So what do we have? X plus the number we had before we squared it. X plus 2, quantity squared. That's the left-hand side in factored form. On the right side, 7. Did I see a sign of disappointment in your face? I'm afraid so. It's not going to come out even, but we can do it. So square root property, x plus 2 equals, write it down twice so I don't forget. Square root of 7, we're stuck with a radical. No big deal. Go over here, you have the opposite of it. Real simple. Now subtract 2 from both sides, and we've got one solution for us. And of course, without looking, you know that this is going to be -2 minus the square root of 7. And after you check both of those, you're in good shape. And one more just to finish out the day. We're going to complete the square one more time. All right, let's get this in order. X squared is good. The 8x should be on the other side. That'll be a plus 8x, so we'll leave the blank. And 7 is nice on the other side. You don't have to change anything there. So what do we need to complete the square? Let's grab this 8, multiply it by half, square our answer. We've got 4 squared, which we're going to use later, and 16 is our magic bullet. So x squared plus 8x plus the 16 we just found, and 7 plus 16 balances it out. Factoring, we have x plus the 4 that we had here in the middle. Quantity squared equals 23. Oh, shucks, it doesn't come out even. Oh well, keep going. X plus 4 equals the square root of 23. And also don't forget x plus 4 equals the opposite or negative of the square root of 23. And we're almost there. Subtract 4 from both sides. One of our solutions is negative 4 plus the square root of 23. The second solution, you already know, is negative 4 minus the square root of 23. Well, there you go, folks. 14 examples, a little bit of everything. We don't need anything more exotic. If you can do those, you're in great shape and you know all you need to know. And last, just to wrap things up, you might want to hit a pause after you see this. You might even want to take a screenshot of that. Some more examples. It tells you what the steps are. Don't forget, in the first one, they already had a 1x squared. So you're sort of missing step 1, or maybe you call it step 0, whatever. But if you were following what I did, you should be in good shape. Well, I hope that helps you with completing the square, and I'll see you in class. Bye-bye.